But let me have one more biscuit and then we can go wherever you want.
Okay, sounds good. Enjoy it.
What are you doing at the moment outside of your...
That's not a rusk, is it? That's not a rusk. Not very South African.
That's not a rusk. That's how your podcast should start. It's like first line. That's not a rusk, is it?
Ever wondered how your current beliefs about Iran might be wrong? What are the people of Iran really like? And what exactly is Taarof? If you'd like to find out, then you're in the right place. Welcome to Between Views. I'm your host, Alec Koski. This podcast aims to cast light on and connect you with inspirational people, identify them as potential mentors in your journey, and invite them to share their stories and wisdom with the world. My hope is that this podcast contains some information that is vital in your journey, or maybe even shifts something you believe. In this episode, we converse with Pierre Heistein about the stories of the people he met on his 3-month, 11,000 kilometre journey through Iran. I'm sure by the end of this, some of your ideas about Iran will have changed. Enjoy the episode. When I first met Pierre, he was travelling alongside his best friend Luke in Arequipa in southern Peru, and they decided to go on a tour of the Colca Canyon as their van had recently broken down. I first met Luke and bonded with him quickly. To begin, Pierre seemed to keep to himself and enjoy the silence of contemplation. Later, through the traverse of the canyon and a few card games and tins of cheap beer, we quickly all became friends. After only 2 days alongside Pierre and Luke, they invited me to join them on a backroad volcanic journey on a road they had found on a map but wasn't part of any common tourist route. This quickly turned into 2 incredible weeks, picking up hitchhikers, patting llamas, buying banana cake, escaping the entrapment of desert shrubs, climbing unknown peaks, exploring salt flats, surfing unknown waters, sleeping in freezing conditions, milking cows, midnight tyre change missions, driving over landslides, and a lot of box wine, sardines and porridge. During my time with Pierre, I admired his ability to speak Spanish with the locals, to write, to observe, to take solitude and time to appreciate nature, to move at his own pace, and the camaraderie and acceptance he afforded me during our adventure. Since then, he has had a multitude of life changes and projects unfold, and today we are here to explore them and also celebrate the release of your latest project, Talking to Iran. Welcome, Pierre.
Thank you. That's a cool introduction. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
I think it doesn't matter where you met us on our trip. The line, their van had recently broke down would stay true.
Yeah, true. The van was breaking down mostly the whole time. That is constant along the trip.
Damn bad. Yeah.
So,
thank you. I appreciate that. Really nice to.
You know, that's actually a story that would be worth going into on its own one time. I think that's the biggest story of my life. That moment with you, for sure.
Well, it was a great trip.
So, I've got first question here. It's not really a question. I did ask you if you would be interested in reading one of the chapters of your Talking with Iran page that you've started.
Let's do that. I won't read a chapter because, well, for the simple reason I don't think I've really broken the book up into chapters yet, but I can read an extract.
I was under the impression that what I'd seen online was what they were like chapters.
All right, let's call them chapters. I like that. Yeah. So I mean, what's online is broken up. The whole book is kind of a different. It's a series of anecdotes that connect, obviously. It came together like that because and it's funny, I don't read a lot of travel writing, strangely enough, and here I am writing it. And one of the reasons for that is I'm not that interested in the people traveling, personal preference. But what that does mean is that when I was writing this, I didn't want to talk about me in any way, so I wasn't interested in writing, and I wouldn't be interested in reading anything about how I got from point A to point B. So it's a story I really tried to tell through what I found most interesting on the trip which was the other people. So it's not disjointed by any way, but it does kind of hop between interactions and instances, with very little time spent on describing the way there, or sometimes even where I was. So yeah, and then what I'm kind of publishing online is slowly rolling that out in lengths that are easy to read, on your phone, while you're on a train, while you're at work, while you're in the loo, wherever. I didn't want to trap it into, now you have to sit down for a couple of hours on the weekend to read this. So let's call them chapters. I like that, Alec. That's fine.
I'm enjoying that. I've read all 4 so far that are out, and the one that I was reading today was just what was it called again? It was about the guys that you met, and what I found interesting in that chapter anyway was kind of the, I guess, attitudes towards women in Iran. It seems like it's very back in time, comparatively speaking, with where I'm from. But I understand that that's kind of part of the makeup of the culture there.
Is it though? Is it back in time?
How do you
Let's read that quickly. Well, I'll read that one for your audience quickly.
Okay, let's read.
So was there any context here before? No, it starts right off the cuff.
Okay.
What's up, dude? Where you from, man? South Africa. Nice, man. I just came back from Canada. You live there? Yeah, 20 years. Now I'm back. I sell beauty products. I also own a beauty salon, he said. I was back at Sam Cafe. David was thick-set with a square jaw. His hair was immaculate. His jacket was a perfect fit, small enough to draw attention to his chest, but not tight. Adam, his friend, nodded at me across the shared table. I work with young ladies, and Adam does old people, he laughed. I work in marketing, said Adam. What story sells? What do Iranians aspire to? I asked him. Iranians are so difficult to understand because they never say what they mean, he said. I prefer people from the West. They are direct and transparent. So have you fucked any Iranian girls yet? Asked David. I was taken aback, but I hit it well. Is that something tourists typically do? I asked sarcastically. Not really, man, but it's so easy. Look, I'll show you pictures of the girls I'm sleeping with. 2 striking women entered their cafe and sat at the table. They glanced our way occasionally while we talked. After brief jeering between the 2 men, Adam leaned forward, moved the lamp aside and spoke to them. He brought David into the conversation and introduced the women by name. David said a few words and then asked each of them for their numbers, which they gladly shared. He sat back next to me and laughed. You see, man, I get Adam to do all the work and then I invite them to the beauty salon. Maybe I'll fuck them, maybe I won't, he said with a shrug. So back to your original comment, right? And my counter question to you, is it that backward? I mean, I cannot in any way speak for where you are or the culture you're in, but comparing to, pretty much anywhere else I've been, that's not for me that, I'm coming across these people, these kinds of interactions with women, these kinds of settings all the time. Whether that's South Africa, England, Argentina, the US, here in Italy. Sure, it's not the curve of progress, but can we relate it in any way to the Iranian culture's relationship with women? Or is this a bigger picture of men's culture with women? Obviously with its exceptions. I'm not blanketing all men. There's a bell curve here, and hopefully that behavior is going to move back along the bell curve until it becomes the unwanted extreme that's back in the day. But I would hazard a guess that it's probably still maybe not average anymore, but certainly not far from it, globally speaking.
I think maybe the circles I've placed myself in aren't reflective of that chat anymore, but I do know that it still exists here. I guess it kind of depends what the social circle or people you're with are like. And I do come across people who still think that way. But what I was getting at was, I think in Australia, there's been lots of education about it, and the general trajectory is towards respect, as far as I can tell. So that's why it was kind of like contrasting with that when I read that chapter.
Yeah, and I think that might be fair. Yeah, I mean, there's a whole. I can't really talk about Iranian culture. I can only talk about my interaction with it, because
right.
First it's so vast, but then also it's I was only able to most of the time really have proper conversations with people that could speak English. I mean, there were a lot of stories about conversations that were not in English, but they obviously weren't very deep or complex. So immediately, I get a biased view. And even this, you wonder, I wonder what these guys are really like. I mean, they might also have just seen a white foreigner kind of acting up to that or not. I don't know. I mean, this yeah. And this is one of the big challenges of my project, right? Is that I've had to be really brave of publishing things out of context, because if you read even the first 4 chapters, like you say, by the time you finish the book, you're not going to think what you're thinking now about Iran or its culture. And there's this thing, anxiety I have as I write and I publish, thinking, but I need to tell people that now in case they stop reading. I need to let them see, like, this is not representative. But that would be terrible storytelling. That would be.
Because even that one chapter, or that one piece of I guess what we're calling a chapter now, wasn't reflective of the rest of the writing that you'd done in that whole block of text as well. Like, each of those 4 pages that have come out so far have all been vastly different one to the next. It shows, I think, the speed at which you can move through and meet people just by like wandering through those streets and staying in different places every night. It's kind of crazy. It paints a picture of how many people you can interact with should you be moving at that pace. Can you give me an overview of your whole trip out there? Just, I know obviously that what you're doing, your project is that, but if you could summarise the trip that you went on to Iran and what were your motivations for going there?
Sure, of course. Can I do something first though? Can I read just one more extract?
You can.
Just to get some balance.
You can.
So, well, no, not balance. That's in itself is a judgment call. I just want to. So we've introduced you to David, right? So there's one person. So, but your comments on contrast suddenly made me remember Hassan. Sorry, Muhammad. Muhammad was his name. So let me quickly just read you this, right? So, and they're about the same age, these 2 guys, right? About 34, 35 years old. Muhammad was 34. "Hello, how are you?" he said. "I'm well, thank you. And you?" I replied. "Good. Sit down, please." Muhammad was 34 years old, but looked over 40. He was clearly bald, and the hair that remained was grey. He had a cough that a dozen studies could not find the cause for. After every few sentences, he closed his left nostril with his finger and snorted quietly. Muhammad was not interested in where I was from. "I remember when I was a child," he said, "at a very young age, I asked my parents why God made the insects. They do not have any purpose. In my life, I've never found anything extraordinary. Have you?" "I think insects are extraordinary," I said. "Did you ever find an answer to why God made the insect?" "No. Perhaps it is simply that they are beautiful," I offered. "I could convince myself of that," he said. "They are part of our beauty. Are you very logical?" "I used to be. And now?" "I started to let it go. I started to appreciate the beauty of something just being beautiful. You know, there are only 2 things that you can be satisfied with in this world," he said. "Love and beauty. The first thing is love. But I don't know why. Even people when people love each other, they get thirsty to love another thing. Love is insatiable. When you love somebody, it is fake matter. Why, I ask? Because you should not love a person. Why? Because a person is just a symptom of the thing that you have to love. And what is that thing that you have to love? Your inner side. You won't be satisfied with loving a person. Maybe for 2 or 3 years, you may like her, but you won't love her. Ever? Or until you love yourself, I asked. Ever. Because of the texture of your love. Do you know texture? Explain it to me. You know, texture of that is cotton, he said, pointing at my shirt. Texture of this is jean. Texture of this is leather. The texture of love is just unique, and it is in your inner side. Why does that mean then that you cannot love somebody else? Because you have to love yourself. If you love somebody else, you will not be satisfied. It's like when you're thirsty, you need water. If I serve you soda, you will not be satisfied. Even if I serve you 1,000 gallons of soda, you will not be satisfied. Your thirst won't be sold by soda. You need water. Why? Because the texture of your thirst needs water. And you have your own God inside yourself. And by loving it, you will get your self-discipline, your self-satisfaction, your inner prosperity. And you will increase your power and your confidence to manage yourself, control yourself, and to get everything that you want. But does that not also increase your ability to love others and the insect? I asked. If you love somebody and you add sexual pleasure, it's like eating a delicious food. But the texture of your love for yourself is different. It's an extraordinary thing. I don't know if you have ever experienced loving your girlfriend, but after 2, 3, 5, or 7 years, you want to change, although you had a deep love with her. But if you love yourself, if you find the voice of your heart, you won't get tired. How do you find the voice of your heart? I asked him. That's my question. That's my current question. I am in the process of getting the answer. And I think that when I find it, I won't desire anything.
Wow.
And that guy, no jokes, he just called me over from a park bench and made me sit down. And that was exactly how he started the dialogue. Like no one's ever going to believe me, right? They're going to think, oh, that's nicely edited. That conversation probably was like 2 hours. No, that is exactly what happened. I was just like, oh my, okay. So now put him and David in a room. What happens? Now put him and David in a room. What happens? And now walk out of that room and someone asks you, so what's culture in Iran like? Okay. How the hell do you answer that question?
Right.
No idea. So
it's a massive contrast.
Right? But these contrasts are around us all the time. I mean, you and I probably have that contrast. We've just got to find the right topic that contrasts enough. And so actually maybe, I mean, I felt like I was diverting you from your question, but maybe not. I mean, that for me was how this project started. That was like, I have this opinion. I have this very strong opinion of Iran, as most of us do, I think, even if we don't voice it or make it conscious. Like, if someone put a gun to our head and say, what do you think about Iran? We will very quickly come up with an opinion and realize we have one. And so I was living with this opinion for whatever it was, 20-something years of my life. And then I met some Iranians in, I can't remember. So I have no idea. London, I think, or Canada, I can't remember. And it just, I was like, whoa, that's not, like, this is not fitting together. And it really made me interrogate like this just assumed opinion I had about Iran because it didn't fit. And again, it was contrast. And I thought, what's going on here? Like, no one had ever asked me, literally, like, what do you think of Iran? But I was asking myself that, and I couldn't answer that question. But more than that, I realized that in order to answer that question, if I went out and like looked for information, I would just be falling into the same space that I was being fed from anyway. Which is mostly the news, right? And I thought, no, well, that sounds like an adventure. Let's try go to Iran. And it took a few years to figure out how and other life stuff came along and whatever. But eventually I did go there. And in the book, so the book was I guess what it is an invitation to others who either through coming across this book or through other things are asking the same question, or asking like, well, what is my opinion of this place, of this culture? And more importantly, why do I have that opinion? Like, what has fed that opinion? And is there something else I can feed into that opinion machine to see what else comes out? So, I mean, I don't claim that this tells the truth. No, I mean, I'm very sure that this does not tell the truth about Iran. I mean, if truth exists, it's merely a different ingredient in the cake mix, because I don't think Iran's so weird, man. I mean, just think about like Iran as a concept in our lives, like in your very personal life, and whoever's listening to this. It's the country that is so present in our minds, in our dialogue, or in our conscious. I mean, you don't ever like hear about people speaking about Suriname or I don't know. And yet you probably know about as much about Iran as you do about Suriname. Really, like how much do you actually know about the place, its culture, its people? But yet Iran has this figure in our lives. And that's what I just found very uncomfortable. It's like, why? What is this thing? And what the hell's going on there? So the book is, I guess, an invitation to others who are interested in that, but can't take 3 months off to go and couch surf and try hitchhike and drag themselves 11,000 kilometers around the country to get an insight into that. Yeah.
It reminds me, funnily enough, of a book that I read, and I wanted to read it for ages, but you couldn't really just buy it from online. It was a book you kind of just had to come across, and I came across it in Mexico. It was just sat there on a bookshelf ready to go in a book exchange, and that book was called Hitchhiking Through the Axis of Evil, but it was in Spanish, and it was written, I think, by an Argentinian guy
yeah.
Have you ever read that book before?
No, but I've heard about it.
It gives me like kind of similar vibes to that. A guy who was not convinced that what he had heard about this part of the world was the truth. So he went to explore it on his own. And I remember reading that, and sure enough, it was the very contrast to what I thought. It was like the opposite of what I thought about those countries when he got there. And I think I was just reading in your one today that you talked to a pretty high up TV presenter or something, or some kind of...
Yeah, I was a journalist, yeah.
And it's funny, like, when I found from reading a little bit that when white people go down there, the people tend to invite them in so openly a lot of the time. Did you find that to be an experience that you had as well?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, but what's interesting is it's not... So there's two levels of all kinds of hospitality in Iran that I noticed. One was definitely like, you are a white foreigner, and they know how they're seen by the world and are desperate to change that story. The people of Iran, and so they go out of their way, sometimes in quite an exaggerated way to the hospitality is, it can be uncomfortable sometimes. I mean, like, people would often invite me into their homes to stay. So I did a lot of couch surfing. So that's kind of, people obviously that's different. That's, they put out on a platform that come and stay with me. But then there were a lot of people just in taxis and things, or, buses that would even if we couldn't really speak together, and there were times where I'd understand, they'd be saying like, come to my home. There are a couple of those stories later in the book, but those were crazy, right? So when you can't speak the language and some dude in a bus is going, either through Google Translate or signs or whatever, saying like, come stay in my home. But you have no idea, like zero idea what kind of home, who he lives with, where he lives. I mean, he gets off the bus. You don't know if he's then like if he's walking or taking another bus or whatever. And it was the most beautiful trip in that way because I had the freedom to say yes. I had the freedom to be like, yeah, okay, I don't really know where we're going or how long we're going to be there for, but
so
let's
go.
Did you
go with the bus man?
Yeah, and I went for it. There was one time when I went home with a guy. Yeah, literally, he could speak no English, nothing. We didn't have internet either, so I couldn't bring out my Google Translator, which was also really bad. There's a funny story about me thinking I was going to die once because of Google Translate, but I wasn't. But this guy said he invited me. He just invited me home. So I was like, okay, we're going to get off the bus with this dude and just follow him until he indicates otherwise. And we did. We walked a couple of blocks. We went to his home, and he had just come back. But he was in the process of coming back from his 2-year military assignment, so his military training, and like, I think they're allowed 1 or 2 visits or whatever to their family in that time. But it's basically like you go off and it's almost, it's consignment. It's is that what you call it? It's not the word. I know I've gone blank what the word is. But his whole family was there, like in this big welcome home party. Like big, well, it wasn't. It was just his family, but it was like, a lot of emotion, a lot of like celebrating, like he'd finally finished his compulsory 2 years of military. He could now get on with his life. I mean, that's a whole another topic on, young males and how this military thing gets in the way of their lives. And he was walking in to be received by his family, having been away so long. And there's this like white dude with a backpack following him into his house. And he then explained to the family why there was a white dude with a backpack following him into his house. And I spent like the next couple of days sleeping on his floor while he took me around his local town, and speaking to his family and God knows how. I mean, none of them could speak a word of English. And so, yeah, I mean, there was that kind of hospitality, which I'm sure, wouldn't, if I was Iraqi or, of the region or whatever, wouldn't have happened. But the hospitality in Iran was definitely not only foreign focused. It was remarkable how not necessarily kind and welcoming, and you don't want to paint like this utopic picture of everyone being nice. Certainly wasn't that, but like little signs. I mean, just between people. But then one that really stood out for me was that in all the kind of public parks around Iran, you can, local people can pitch a tent and sleep in the park. And the reason for that is because all the mosques and the prayer areas, they have clean bathrooms and fresh water, to clean yourself before prayer. And so, people would use those also as kind of bathrooms if they're camping in the park. And the reason for that was if people needed to come to a main city center and go to the hospital and like look after their family members in hospital, they had somewhere to stay. And it worked. Like there's nothing on paper that says that should work. Everything about it says, no, well, this is going to be abused, homelessness is going to creep in, these parks are going to be unlivable, unenjoyable. And no, a couple of tents for people who needed that. And then other people just enjoying the park. And it was just this, all the mosques. I mean, and I met a couple of other travelers who used this literally, but all the mosques stayed open, apart from like maybe the big touristy ones or kind of maybe all the mosques is the wrong way of phrasing that. Like the regional kind of village mosques were open all night. I mean, if you wanted to, you could go and sleep on the floor there the whole night. And both some locals and even some foreigners traveling. I mean, there was one guy who was cycling from China to Holland or something, and that's where he stayed. He'd just sleep on the floors of mosques throughout his trip to Iran. And that was okay. I was like, whoa, all right. And so the hospitality was nuts. I mean, so you'd stay with people, and then I mean, they'd pay for obviously all your food. They wouldn't accept any money. That was almost insulting. You know, they absolutely would not accept that. I was like, okay, fine. I can do that. That's culturally, I would do the same in my home. Fair enough. Yeah. And then we'd go and see like sites or attractions or whatever, like something in the town that you might have to pay an entrance for. And as a foreigner, you'd pay 10 times as much as the locals. And they would insist on paying for me. Oh, and that was always a battle, but they won.
They would pay your foreigner price.
Yeah, they would pay my entrance. They refused to let me spend any money.
Really?
I was like, okay, that's uncomfortable, but I guess this is a shared experience. You're obviously hugely passionate about this, so who am I to say no? Okay, I accept, thank you. And then where I did draw the line was that they dropped me off at a bus station, and it happened 2 or 3 times. They dropped me off at the bus station and then want to go and pay my bus fee to the next town. And I was like, no. That's where I draw the line. Like, this, now you respect my culture, buddy. Yeah. My culture is we do not live off like other people. Yeah. To put it broadly and simply, but I was like, this is not a shared experience. Like, I appreciate your hospitality, but this is not a shared experience now. Like, no, this is my trip. I am moving away. I'm going. I've got this.
So what do you think was the primary reason for that? Is it purely cultural?
I think that there is culture, and there's this weird concept called Taarof as well, which I had to navigate. And this is also where you need to be a bit careful about. You need to be careful, or at least have a bit of criteria when hearing people talk about hospitality in Iran, because there's also, you know, if you spend a couple of days there and you know, rave about the hospitality in Iran, it might have actually made things very complex, because there's this concept of Taarof, which is, and it's more traditional and is fading away, I was told, but it's this idea of you offer things 3 times and then the other has to refuse it 3 times. Like, so there's a lot of non-genuine offering. One of the craziest examples I heard of this was not my own experience. It was another guy from New Zealand, and he had also kind of stayed with his family, and they'd gone out to the market, and the mother had bought some sandals or like flip-flops or whatever, and or bought some stuff and whatever, and he bought some stuff, and they went back into the home, and he kind of just chit-chat, you know, just making conversation, said, oh, you know, what did you buy? And she showed him these small little pink sandals, and he said, oh, those are very pretty. And she said, they're for you. And he was like, oh no. And like, you know, he'd been there. It was such a ridiculous example. And he'd been there long enough to understand that, no, they definitely weren't for him, obviously. And she was just kind of in this awkward situation of, he'd flagged, like, from the other side, he'd brought up that she had bought something for herself and not offered anything to him. And she felt really uncomfortable. So now was offering him what she'd bought for herself, which was, she was not offering, you know, that was in the act of recognizing, you know, this Taarof. It was like, so she offered 3 times, he refused 3 times, and everything was settled. And that can happen, you know, with a lot of people. And it happened to me once when I commented on the same Muhammad, the guy I just read, you know, because I spent a couple of days around him and his friends. And, you know, at one point I told him he was looking very good. And his jacket was very nice, and he looked handsome. And what ensued was a comfortable conversation of me trying to stop him offering me his jacket. And yeah, you know, he could speak quite good English. So and by that, he was the one who actually explained this truth. And I caught him out, and I said, you're Taaroofing me, aren't you? And he laughed. He said, yes, I am. And so, and also going in and buying stuff. I remember buying stuff from shops, pens or whatever. And that would happen. They'd say, no, don't pay for it. And, you know, the first couple of times it happened, I was like, whoa, these guys are so kind. I get free stuff. And then I realized, and then I started, you know, no, refusing 3 times. But that said, half the time the people still went, no, take it, you know, or sometimes they even, you know, on the second refusal, they went, no, Taarof, go. I was like, okay. And so
So just when you thought you had it, it became
exactly, exactly. But yeah, I mean, it just immense kindness.
So why does Taarof exist? Did you say? That's good. That's what we want.
I don't know. I don't know. The why. It's a good question. Just culture. I mean, maybe an Iranian could explain this to you better, but for the limited, and everything I say today is from my limited experience.
Did you ever have it, I think, Pierre, that like someone came and complimented you and was going for like the reverse Taarof? Did you ever get that situation?
No. Yes, definitely had it when I offered something that was, that the person very obviously wanted, whether it was just sharing a meal or whatever, and they would refuse once or twice before accepting, definitely had that. Or no, they'd refuse 3 times, and then I'd have to insist, and then they would accept. Right. But no. But it's not. It's a bit exaggerated, but there's certain patterns in British culture of politeness for politeness' sake. Non-genuine politeness. Can you call it non-genuine? Maybe that's not fair, but it's there's. How many times do we ask someone, "How are you?" when we really don't care how they are? And how many times, when someone actually replies, you're like, yeah, that's not. I didn't really want that conversation. Thanks. That's Taarof, isn't it? Like, hey man, How are you? Yeah, good, fine. That's why the word fine exists, right? Because it has no other useful meaning. So maybe it's not so far off. And I found a lot of things in Iran were like that. A lot of things. You start looking at your own culture. It definitely made me look at my own culture differently.
Yeah. What did you learn about your own culture from being in Iran?
Going back to your original conversation, it was so easy to criticize the chauvinism and the patriarchy. It was so easy. And granted, I went back from Iran to South Africa and Argentina. So, there's a lot of work to be done there. But I think it was funny. I think only after Iran did I fully appreciate how rife the patriarchal attitudes towards women were in my own culture. Because I'd been to a place that took that into the extreme. It's a bit like apartheid in South Africa, right? Extreme institutionalized racism. You understand it in its extreme, naked, brazen self, and then you go back to places like the US, Australia, wherever, and you realize, oh, wait a minute, South Africa wasn't that different. All we did was institutionalize it, put rules behind it, make it part of the law. And in many ways, Iran is the same. Like the limiting freedom that women have is written by law, by their governing government. There's some great wording for you. It's brought down as law, like men this, woman that. Okay, and we think, oh, that's so draconian, that's so backwards. Oh my God, how can a country like that still exist? Now look at the number of female versus male CEOs in the US. Look at the UN Security Council. Look at, the list goes on. And on what pedestal can we stand and say, oh, Iran is so patriarchal, they treat women so badly, look at us. Now, don't get me wrong, and I really hope that this doesn't get twisted. Someone's like saying, oh, it's not that bad in Iran. No, it is really bad in Iran. It is so bad. But I think it's also useful to allow its extremity to cast a mirror. That makes no sense. To be a mirror, to cast a reflection back on us and be like, preach, but do so from a point of inner reflection, because you're not all that pretty. And just because it's not written into law doesn't mean it's not happening anyway. And that for me is kind of what I realized going back. And, it was a couple of years ago, so thankfully the world has woken up to this in many ways. Still a lot of work to be done, but I don't think it's the same level of perhaps enlightenment or realization that I would have had that happen today. And I think a lot of this has been spoken about in the last few years especially. But that's just one example.
Thank you for listening to the first part of our interview with Pierre. Pierre will be with us for the next 3 weeks, sharing his experience of Iran and its people. It's something you don't want to miss. This will be released the coming Monday. Next, if you're a star, why not leave some for us, wherever you're listening, and let us know what you think. This generally helps us to get discovered by new listeners, and is kind of like saying thank you in the podcast world. Thirdly, Between Views is closing its Patreon community. Thank you to all those who supported us at the beginning. We'll let you know ASAP how you can stay in touch. In other news, Between Views is always looking for collaborators. If you want to join the team or create something together, then please reach out on Instagram. Finally, if you know someone who deserves to be interviewed or just have some feedback for us, then send us an email at betweenviewsbv@gmail.com and I can answer any of your questions. Thanks again, and see you soon, Between Views.